Discover 10 spine-chilling winter horror stories exposed for the cursed cold nights. Volume 2. Emily's breath hung in the frigid air like a ghost, each puff a white whisper against the bitter chill. The winter winds howled through the empty streets of Willow Creek, making the shadows dance. She left her shift at the diner, the clattering of dishes replaced by an eerie silence. Something felt dreadfully wrong as she trudged toward home. The night was too still, too quiet, and so interminably cold. Yet even amidst the frostbite, warmth spread through her at the thought of Brian, waiting with his frustrations, his laughter, his everything. But as she turned the key in the lock, a jolt of cold dread rolled down her spine. The house was dark and silent. Too silent. "Brian?" she called, her voice a weak echo against the walls. Only the shadow of his coat on the hook greeted her. It was the absence that screamed. The TV, usually a flickering companion in their routine, was off, casting the living room into an unsettling gloom. Panic gripped her heart. "He's just out with friends," she told herself, but each minute stretched into eternity. The gnawing anxiety twisted in her gut. Something was amiss. Outside, the wind picked up again, ruffling the snow drifts now blanketing the street. As she peered through the window, the small-town familiarity morphed into something sinister, the trees looming with secrets, even Mr. Thompson, their elderly neighbor, twisted with the whispers of the town. Tales spread like wildfire about the old man's late-night antics, rummaging through the dark, ghostly figures flitting through the townsfolk's peripheral vision. It clawed at her. She couldn't wait. She grabbed her coat and stepped back into the icy night. Knocking on doors, Emily's heart raced. Neighbors answered, faces draped in polite indifference. They didn't care. The cold, glacial smiles masked their apathy, and an unsettling nausea bubbled in her throat. Did they not feel it? Did they not sense the hollow void left behind? "Where's Brian?" she pressed, but her questions fell on deaf ears, drowned out by their fear of the unknown. Shadows flickered at the edge of her vision, whispers tugged at the corners of her mind. The fabric of calm unwound, revealing a festering dread, and then it came, a sound shattering the stillness, a scream snatched from the winds. Her heart raced as she turned towards the woods, the lurking darkness promising unknown horrors. The foreboding trees beckoned, twisting like gnarled hands sheltering threats, hidden secrets waiting to be unearthed. And as she stepped onto the snowy path leading deeper into the thicket of despair, adrenaline surged. Emily stumbled over the crunch of branches and crackling twigs beneath her feet, every snap echoing like a gunshot through the night. Something was watching. She felt it in her bones, the icy fingers of panic clawing their way up her spine. Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Her pulse pounded in her ears as she approached an old cabin slumped beneath the weight of snow, a repository of forgotten histories murmuring through the walls. Footprints marked the snow, strange symbols etched into the ice, pulling her closer into the frigid void. Before she could reach for the door, figures shifted in the tree's dark, mirthless shapes with empty eyes, the winter wind carrying their whispers. In that frozen moment, Emily realized the truth. She might not be searching for Brian anymore. She was the prey, and the forest hungered. Fear surged through her, she had a choice to make. To confront the darkness or run back into the icy unknown. But what awaited her behind that cabin door? The horror closed in, and the night became her only ally. Emily's hand brushed the door of the cabin, but past its fragile wooden frame loomed a thick wall of unseen terror. The air cooled even further, stirring unease within her. She hesitated, the shadows seemed to pulse with life, beckoning her to step inside. Just as she was about to abandon her quest, the wind howled one last time, as if warning her. Ignoring the instinct to flee, she pushed the door open. The rusted hinges creaked loudly, the noise unraveling the thick silence. Inside, the cabin was dim and musty, the air heavy with dust that danced in the faint light filtering through grimy windows. Cold seeped through the walls, pinching at her skin. A single table stood in the center, scattered with remnants of a past that should have long faded, a torn ledger, a candle stubs melted over the years, and beneath them, something shrouded in cloth. A sudden crashing sound from behind her made her spin around, heart hammering in her chest. The door slammed shut with a force that rattled the frame. Panic surged. The shadows shifted, and for a moment, she thought she saw a figure dart behind the cabin's window. Her breath quickened, icy tendrils of dread wrapping around her throat. "Brian?" she whispered, desperation clawing through her voice. No answer. Only silence echoed, a heavy cloak pressing down on her. She scanned the room, each creak of the floorboards amplifying the danger surrounding her. The dark corners seemed alive, swirling. As she turned back to the table, the cloth seemed to tremble, a pulse of its own. She stepped forward, heart racing, and pulled it back. What lay beneath made her stomach churn, a collection of grotesque objects and notes scrawled in frantic handwriting. A series of names, each crossed out, surrounded by hurried sketches of twisted faces. This wasn't just a cabin, it was a shrine. A chill explored every nerve in her body, flooding her with an icy realization. These marks on the wall, they were not random. Suddenly, the air thickened and blurred around her. Whispers snaked through the darkness. They called her name, seductive and chilling, laced with an echoing grief that felt hauntingly familiar. Emily. The hairs on her neck spiked. It was a voice she recognized, twisted through the air like a distant memory. "Brian?" Her voice trembled, swallowed by the sounds of the room. She turned back towards the door, ready to flee, but the sudden snap of a branch outside made her freeze. Faint shapes shifted outside, silhouetted against the moonlight, impossibly tall and hauntingly thin. They moved with a grace that was more predator than prey. The whispers grew louder, filling every crevice of her mind. "Stay, join us!" Panic ignited in her chest, she had to get out. Emily clawed at the door, but it wouldn't budge, as though someone held it shut from the other side. The world around her spiraled, shadows coiling towards her, hungry for her fear. She turned back, eyes wide with fear as she forced herself to confront the truth buried deep in the darkness. She wasn't merely looking for Brian. The hunt had turned. This cabin, this shadowy nest had claimed him, and now, it demanded her too. There was no escaping. Not from the voices. Not from the figures outside. As the shadows danced near the windows, she tore through the cabin, searching for a way out, her heart hammering, breaths short and frantic. Desperation clawed at her, she had to find Brian before the cold swallowed them both. And then, amidst her frantic flailing, she discovered a trapdoor in the corner, its wooden surface half hidden beneath the dust. The whispers surged, tearing at her resolve. She took a breath, bracing for what lay below, but as she lifted the door, a frigid gust blew up, and with it, the unmistakable scent of decay. What awaited her below that door? Would it lead to Brian or something far worse? The shadows flickered, and she knew she had only moments before the darkness claimed her completely. Emily's heart raced as she stared into the dark maw of the trapdoor. The scent of decay hung heavily in the air, a foreboding promise of what lay beneath. She gripped the edges of the doorframe, her knuckles whitening, fighting against the urge to recoil. The whispers swirled around her, intent on drawing her in. "Emily, come down!" they lured her, a siren's song threaded with despair. She had to choose to confront whatever horror awaited below or face the shadows creeping ever closer. With a shaky breath, she steeled herself. What other options did she have? The hinges protested as she pulled the trapdoor open wider, revealing a narrow staircase descending into darkness. The dim light from the cabin barely illuminated the first few steps, but she could feel the chill radiating up from below, like icy fingers curling around her ankles. Her mind screamed warnings, but desperation compelled her forward. She bit her lip and took her first step down. Each creak echoed ominously in the silence. She moved slowly, one foot after the other, the whispers growing louder with every descent. "Join us," it beckoned, pulling her deeper into the abyss. Emily fumbled for her phone, the only source of light she could trust in this place. She flicked it on, the glow piercing the darkness just enough to reveal the steps ahead, caked with dirt and dust, with something darker smeared across them, a visceral testament to what had transpired. When she reached the bottom, the air was thick, stifling. The faint beam from her phone quivered, illuminating a small room lined with what looked like shelves. But they weren't filled with books or trinkets, they were filled with jars. Hundreds of jars. Each contained something suspended in murky liquid. As she moved closer, she recoiled. Each jar held a fragment of flesh, bits of hair floating like dead weeds, their twisted faces forever sealed behind glass. "Brian!" she called, voice cracking. The silence that followed clawed at her insides. Timing pressed down like a weight, and her breath caught as she scanned the room. The further she looked, the more she understood. Each jar was labeled with names she didn't recognize but felt an unsettling pull towards. A chill cascaded down her spine. Were these the people the cabin had taken? As the whispers grew more frantic, she caught sight of a larger jar at the far end of the room. Emblazoned on it was the name Brian. Fear seized her throat. It couldn't be. She stumbled towards it, desperation clawing at her eyes. But as she reached for it, a bone-chilling laugh echoed around her. Shadows twisted in the corners, morphing into shapes that defied understanding. Something coalesced from the darkness, a figure with elongated limbs and hollow eyes, standing tall and watching. "You should have stayed away," it hissed, the voice of the cabin itself, condemning her. Emily stumbled back, her heart racing as she realized she wasn't alone. The whispers had turned into audible gasps and screams, a choir of those lost to the cabin. She was trapped, cornered. The figure advanced, its form shimmering in the dim light, fingers stretching forward like claws closing in on her. In a panic, she pivoted, sprinting back toward the stairs, but the shadows clawed at her, dragging her with chilling force. Just as she reached the bottom step, the light from her phone flickered and died, plunging her into darkness. The tide of terror engulfed her, and with one frantic shove, she flung herself up the stairs, slamming the trapdoor shut behind her. Gasping for breath, she backed against it, heart pounding wildly. Would that be enough to keep the horrors at bay? Or had she sealed herself within their grasp forever? The cabin felt alive, vibrant with a hunger that pulsed through every shadow. And then she heard it. A soft tapping on the door. The figures outside were no longer just watching. They wanted in. What would they do if they got inside? What more did the cabin want from her? Emily's mind raced, trapped in a cycle of dread and desperation. She had to find Brian. Time was running out, and the shadows were closing in. What would she sacrifice to escape this nightmare? Emily pressed her back against the trapdoor, her breaths coming in frantic gasps. The tapping grew more insistent, a steady rhythm that echoed through the creaking wood. "Let us," in, a voice crooned, soft yet piercing, promising release but dripping with malice. She could feel her heart pounding in her chest, the sound merging with the sharp ink of dark dread gathering around her. Panic clawed at her throat. "Brian!" She shouted again, but the only answer was the deepening silence of the cabin. The walls seemed to close in, shadows dancing wildly just out of her sight. She could practically feel their breath, rancid and cold, brushing against her neck. They knew she was here. Behind the door, she could picture the shapes shifting, their intentions stewing in the dark. All at once, the quiet cracked, and a voice, underscored with malicious delight, hissed, "We know where he is, Emily, come out, and we'll show you what could they possibly want from her." Two choices lay heavy on her mind: she could abandon her post at the door and risk whatever lurked outside, or she could confront the horrors she had just escaped. With no time to waste, she swayed away from the trapdoor, scanning the dismal cabin for anything that might help. A flickering lantern caught her eye, oil nearly spent but still hopeful for a tiny flame. She stumbled towards it, gripping the handle with trembling hands, her breath shaky. Would it last long enough? As she fumbled with the matchbox, the scraping sound from behind the trapdoor intensified. It felt as if a multitude of tiny nails were scratching against the wood. Emily's skin prickled. Each match resisted her touch, the wood seeming to mock her urgency. "Emily, help us!" the voices lamented, rising in a cacophony. The air pulsated with their desperation, tangling with her fear. For every match that failed, a chill ripped through her. Was Brian truly out there? Or was he just another name in a jar? In one swift motion, a match sparked to life. The flame flickered, but it felt like a heartbeat reborn in the dark. She held it steady, lighting the lantern, and the dim glow filled the room, revealing crawling shadows lurking in the corners. "Join us, Emily," they whispered, an unbearable harmony of pleading and pain. The lantern's light cast long, grotesque shapes across the walls. In the distance, she spotted more jars lining a dilapidated shelf. Were these the souls they mentioned? Would they haunt her forever if she didn't act? Suddenly, the trapdoor rattled violently, splinters flying. "Emily!" The voices turned frantic, angry. "You're keeping us from freedom!" Her resolve hardened. Clutching the lantern, she hurled herself away from the door, retreating into the cabin. Shadows loomed larger, their whispers crescendoing into a shriek. The lantern illuminated the macabre jars, each face frozen in terror, pleading for liberation. A sickening realization hit her. Would she become one of them? She dashed towards the room's far corner. What if she could break a jar? The destruction might give their souls peace, a way to drive back the darkness. Yet fear gripped her. What if releasing them meant unleashing that same darkness upon herself? The trapdoor splintered, and her decision loomed close. Brian, it had to be done. She reached for the nearest jar, trembling fingers brushing against the glass, but then came a horrific screech, a sound that twisted her gut. "Don't you dare!" Suddenly, the trapdoor burst open, the shadows surging forward, coalescing into a mass of howling shapes. Emily froze, horrified by the sight. The figure from below stood before her, taller and more monstrous than ever, skeletal fingers reaching out as it opened its mouth wider than should be possible. "Your time is up, Emily!" it roared. The cabin throbbed with malevolence, closing in around her as she stood frozen in terror. Nowhere left to run. What was she willing to give up to survive? Would she join the dark chorus behind her, or fight against the shadows tightening their grip? In the eye of the storm, Emily had to make her choice, and soon. The monstrous figure loomed over her, its skeletal face twisting into a grotesque grin. "Embrace us!" it beckoned, fingers curling like spider legs. The smell of decay filled the air around her, mingling with the acrid scent of the lantern's oil. Emily's heart pounded furiously, a drum echoing in her ears, drowning out the whispers that clawed at her sanity. She clutched the lantern tighter, her knuckles whitening. The light flickered, casting wavering shadows that danced and writhed against the walls, almost as if they were alive, responding chaotically to her dread. The jars lined the shelf, their occupants staring wide-eyed, mouths agape in silent cries of terror. "Don't be like us," one whispered, and she could almost see the desperation etched onto its trapped visage. Then the room clenched around her, suffocating and thick like fog. Emily, trembling, backed away from that ghastly sight until her back hit the cabin wall. The monstrous figure towered closer, its breath a rancid gust that coiled around her throat. "You're tethered now," it hissed sweetly, "but we can set you free. Let him go." She shouted back, summoning every ounce of courage as despair threatened to engulf her. "You don't have him. Just let me break the jars." With that, she lunged for the nearest one. Glass met her palm, cold and unyielding. A deafening roar erupted from the shadows. "No. Don't." But the ceramic was demanding, and Emily slammed her fist into the jar with a desperate fury. It shattered, shards spraying out like a million shooting stars. The whispers grew to a horrifying pitch, a chorus of lost voices seeking vindication. As the shards flew, a mist swirled out, a murky fog that twisted and reformed, taking on hints of anguished faces. Freedom, they cried, and she felt an overwhelming rush, a wave of energy and pain that rushed through her, grasping at her limbs. Joyous laughter rang, almost euphoric, but it twisted sickeningly in her stomach. The presence of the creature behind her faltered, just for a moment. Then came the backlash. The floor trembled violently, the walls shuddering as if the entire cabin were alive, angry at this disruption. "Foolish girl!" the figure screeched, overtaken by blinding rage. "You've unleashed our darkness." Emily stumbled away from the chaos, heart racing like she was trying to escape the abyss. But shadows reached out, clawing for her, pulling her back into their fold. The air grew electric, charged with dread. The swirling mist thickened, wrapping her in icy tendrils, not just shadows, but forms of those trapped. Faces hidden, they reached, hands grasping. "Please, please," they murmured, more sorrowful than threatening. "No!" she screamed, realizing the truth. It wasn't just a fight for her life, it was a war for their souls. She couldn't be a part of this nightmare. Not while Brian remained a hostage. "Brian!" she shouted into the vortex of despair. "I will find you. I promise." Hope ignited within her, fierce and bright. With that, Emily bolted for the door, fueled by a desperate determination. She would not die here. But outside, darkness awaited. The world had changed since she arrived, familiar paths twisted and turned, shadows thick and hungry. An echo in the wind carried the murmurs of those she released, warning her of dangers beyond the cabin's threshold. "Emily, we know what you've done," they cried, voices echoing from every corner. Just as she reached for the door, a cold hand gripped her shoulder, halting her. "You can't run from us, not yet," the towering figure hissed. The cabin creaked ominously behind her, and Emily's breath caught. Had she really escaped? In this terrifying limbo, one truth remained: there was no way out unless she found Brian. But could saving him mean losing herself? She took a deep breath, steeling herself for the unknown. The darkness beckoned, and once again, she had a choice to make. Emily's heart raced, pounding against her ribcage like a caged animal desperate to flee. The shadowy hand slipped away as the creature's grip loosened, but she knew it wouldn't let her go for long. The room behind her throbbed with malignancy, its twisted whispers clawing at her mind, threatening to draw her back into the horror of the cabin. "Brian," she murmured, the name a fragile lifeline in this murky nightmare. She had to find him, had to break whoever was holding him captive. The realization slammed into her like a wall: those trapped souls needed her help just as much. They were lost, seduced by promises of freedom, only to find themselves here, eternally bound to the darkness. With excruciating slowness, she took a step back, her gaze darting upwards toward the dark horizon that stretched far beyond the cabin walls. A sliver of moonlight broke through the clouds, illuminating a path worn by footsteps, twisted and unnatural. The air felt thick, heavy with the weight of unfulfilled wishes, and with each breath, Emily tasted the bitterness of the despair. "Find him," a voice whispered from the depths of her mind, cold and haunting. It wasn't just a suggestion, it was an order, drenched in urgency and fear. Before her fear could paralyze her, Emily plunged outside, the night enveloping her like a suffocating shroud. The forest loomed, trees like crooked fingers reaching out towards her, beckoning her deeper into their grasp. With each hurried step, she felt the ground shift beneath her, unstable and alive, as if the very earth conspired against her. As silence settled, surreal and heavy, she strained to listen. The sound of a snapping twig sent her heart into a frenzy. Something was out there, something other than the echoes of agony resonating in the air. "Brian." Her voice sliced through the darkness, desperate, longing. "Where are you?" A few seconds of stillness stretched out, thick and suffocating. Then she heard a faint cry in the wind, almost drowned out by the rustling of leaves. Emily, the voice was muffled and distant, reverberating through her bones. Hope ignited. She surged forward, fueled by adrenaline and determination. The trees closed in around her, shadows flitted and danced just beyond her periphery. Each rustle and crack became a haunting reminder of the twisted souls waiting for her slip, waiting to pull her down into their darkness. Yet, there was also something else, a glimmer of movement. In the corner of her eye, shapes darted between the trees, whispering her name in a chorus of chilling harmony. Emily, join us. With mounting dread, she pressed on. No! She shouted defiantly, shaking her head despite the growing unease swirling within. Each step took her deeper into the forest's clutches, past thick brambles that tugged at her clothes, holding her back like invisible hands. Then, just as the canopy above thickened, she stumbled upon a clearing. It was starkly beautiful, illuminated by the ghastly light of the moon. In its center lay a pit, charred and deep, as if the ground itself had been singed by something unspeakable. Her breath caught when she spotted a familiar figure at the edge. Brian! She cried, but with hope came a wave of despair. He was kneeling, seemingly entranced, his face pale and eyes vacant. Emily, he whispered, a shadow of recognition flickering across his features. He didn't move, didn't even blink. Panic clawed at her throat, and Emily rushed towards him, but the moment she stepped forward, the ground trembled. The breath of the forest pulsed around her, vibrant and alive, shifting and growing with menace. The whispers returned, drowning out her thoughts, a cacophony of souls eager for release. Join us, the shadows gathered, swirling around her in a frenzied dance, wrapping tightly around her ankles, crawling up her legs, as if they wanted to drag her down into the pit. No! She screamed, feeling the slick grip close around her, threatening to pull her under. But then she heard him again. Emily, don't leave me. She looked into Brian's vacant eyes, searching for a flicker of the man she loved, urging him to come back to her. The shadows hissed, creeping closer. Fight it, Brian. Fight. The darkness pulsed in agitation at her words, tightening its grip around her. She had to act. But could she pull him free without losing herself to the gathering void? The ground beneath her cracked ominously. Time was running out, and she had a choice to make. Would she plunge into the darkness to save him? Or would she resist, risking everything in the name of hope? As the shadows lunged, she felt cold tendrils weave around her wrists, and a powerful, furious voice called from somewhere deep within the pit. Embrace us. How much longer could she hold on before being swallowed by the darkness? The shadows tightened their grip, their icy tendrils coiling around Emily's limbs, tugging hard enough to steal her breath. Each heartbeat echoed in her ears, a frantic reminder that time was slipping away as the pit of despair beckoned. She couldn't let go, not yet. Brian! She screamed, desperation mixing with raw adrenaline, and she hurled herself towards him, fighting against the darkness that spun around her like a living creature. His eyes, though hollow, were locked onto hers, as if he were a lighthouse lost in a storm, flickering between recognition and an abyss. Emily, help! His voice was now barely more than a rasp, hauntingly faint, as if he were already fading into the shadows grasping at him. Fear knotted in her stomach, she could feel the pull of the pit trying to lure him back, pulling her down with him. Don't you dare leave me! She shouted, wrenching forward with everything she had, despite the pull of despair attempting to drag her down. The pit quaked beneath her, a low growl echoing as if the very earth were protesting against her intrusion. With a surge of defiance, she reached out, fingers brushing against his arm. A jolt ran through her, hot and electric, as if they were linked by an invisible thread. In that moment, she saw a flicker of the carefree man she remembered, their laughter echoing in her mind, warm and vibrant. Fight, Brian! Come back to me! The shadows hissed in response, angry whispers threatening to drown her out, but she pressed on, determination overriding her fear. She pulled, harder than ever, drawing on memories, love, and a desperate hope. The ground beneath them shook violently, the pit roaring as it opened wider, smoke billowing up with a rancid stench of decay that filled the air. The shadows writhed in fury, but Emily held fast, channeling every ounce of her spirit into him. Don't succumb. Remember us, remember who we are. She felt Brian's fingers quake beneath her grasp, then grow momentarily still. Emily, his voice cracked, wavering like a candle in the wind, but there was something in his tone, something that tugged at her heart. It's not true. You're stronger than this. Her voice was a desperate plea, a lifeline cast into the whirlpool of torment threatening to swallow them both. You have to fight. The shadows released a guttural roar, shaking the trees around them, branches shaking in protest. Emily's feet slipped on the loose earth, her heart crashing against her chest. She could almost feel the darkness enveloping her, trying to wrap around her mind and smother her will. But she couldn't let go. Brian. She threw her weight forward, grasping his arm even harder, willing him to see her, to fight whatever was lurking in that vacant gaze. As if responding to her silent command, his face contorted in anguish, a flicker of life igniting in his darkened eyes. Emily. I am trying. In an instant, the shadows lunged, pulling violently, the ground beneath Emily giving way to a void of darkness. It was a horrifying kaleidoscope of souls reaching out with desperate hands, their agony intertwining with her own. Hold on. Don't let go. She screamed as she tugged harder. The pit roared louder, an angry beast refusing to be denied, but she could see it, the glint of recognition sparkling in Brian's eyes. He was fighting. But would it be enough? As the shadows clashed, swirling furiously around them, the ground fractured completely, tears of dirt and despair cascading into the void. Fear clutched at Emily's insides. This was it, they were either breaking free together, or they would both fall into the dark forever. With one last effort, she summoned every ounce of love, strength, and hope, a final push against the crushing darkness. Brian, take my hand. Would he reach for her, or would the darkness claim them both? The answer hung precariously in the air, a potent question awaiting realization as the pit threatened to swallow them whole. The darkness roared, and in a heartbeat, chaos erupted. Emily's heart raced, each pulse like a drum signaling the end. As the void surged around them, Brian's eyes flared with a glimmer of fight, yet doubt etched deeper into his features. She focused on that flicker, clinging to the hope it represented. Somehow, against all odds, he was still there, still with her. Brian. She cried, feeling her voice crack like brittle glass. I believe in you. With a surprising surge, he lifted his hand, trembling but resolute, reaching through the thick shadow that sought to engulf him. Emily's breath hitched as their fingertips brushed, and a surge of warmth shot through her, a beacon illuminating the murk that surrounded them. The moment of contact exploded like fireworks, flooding their minds with memories, late-night talks, laughter, quiet moments shared under a blanket of star-filled skies. It was enough to push back the encroaching shadows, if only for an instant. The pit roared in fury, the air thick with acrid smoke that choked her throat and stung her eyes. Grab on. She urged, her own strength beginning to falter. But Brian hesitated, eyes reflecting a battle one he fought within himself. Shadows whispered to him, their chilling voices like echoes of a forgotten past. They taunted her, promising despair should he choose to let go. Emily, I don't know if I can. His voice was barely a whisper, drowned out by the cacophony of the shadows. Yes, you can. She shouted, desperation saturating every word. You are stronger than this. Fight back. It was a gamble, this fragile bridge between darkness and light. If he chose the light, maybe they could survive this hellish tempest. If he chose the void, Emily could hardly bear to think of it. Suddenly, a pulse of energy coursed through the ground, like an electric shock. Momentum shifted as the divisions of shadow quivered. The pit shuddered, becoming more than just a monstrous void, it was alive, a beast losing control. Take my hand, Brian. Please. his features twisted with torment. Just as the shadows lunged, seeking to reclaim him, Emily summoned every fragment of strength left within her. She squeezed, forcing the connection they forged with all her heart. "Remember me!" she screamed, channeling the depths of their shared love and memories into their grasp. "Remember us!" In that moment of desperation, their fingers clasped fully, igniting like matches striking against a grindstone. Light flickered out, driving back the shadows violently. The air grew heavy, pulsating with an almost tangible warmth. Then Brian's gaze switched, a dawning realization lighting his face. "Emily, I'm coming." A surge of hope flared between them, enough to defy gravity itself. The shadows writhed, twisting in agony as they fought against the overpowering glimmer. The pit was trembling, almost screaming in protest. It didn't want them to escape. But Emily felt the balance shifting in their favor, just as the darkness lashed out with a vengeance, becoming a storm of fury. It coiled around her legs, trying to drag her down. Panic surged anew, every second counted. "We can do this together. Hold on tight." The ground fractured beneath them, the pit howled louder, an all-consuming sound that threatened to tear the very fabric of reality apart. Just as Emily felt the despair begin to seep into her heart, Brian's grip tightened. Together. With a final desperate shout, their combined strength propelled them upward, breaking through the surface, clawing their way to a sliver of light. And then, darkness enveloped them. The void swallowed them whole once more, silencing her screams. What remained were echoes of despair, and as the shadows settled again, the question lingered: what had they truly escaped, and at what price? In the darkness, the pain of uncertainty lay thick like fog. Emily trembled, her heart in her throat. What awaited them on the other side, if anything at all? The silence was suffocating. A darkness thicker than she ever imagined pressed close, drowning out all signs of life. Emily felt weightless, as if suspended in an endless void. Her mind raced the moment they broke free. It felt like they had slipped into another realm, but this was no sanctuary. "Brian!" she gasped, panic gripping her lungs, a vice tightening around her throat. "Where are you?" "Nothing." The emptiness echoed back her fear. The warmth of their connection felt like a fading ember in her heart. She reached out blindly, her fingers trembling as they brushed against nothingness cool and unyielding. "Brian!" Then, a flicker of faint warmth surged through the cold abyss, seeping into her bones. She followed it instinctively, clawing through the thick shadows that encircled her. "Brian!" A distant groan hummed through the void, like a dark melody beckoning her closer. She caught her breath. Was it real? She held on to hope, even as the chilling murmurs returned, clawing at her sanity. "Stop, it's a trap," the shadows whispered, their voices snarling, weaving doubts like a spider spins its web. "No!" Emily shouted, shaking her head as she stumbled forward. "I want to listen to you." As she pressed on, the shadows twisted, writhing as if alive. Beneath her feet, the ground shifted, each step sinking into an unseen pit. The voices rose, twisting into a fevered dream of laughter interspersed with cries, magnifying her pulse. "Leave this place!" they screamed, echoing in her mind. "You're not worthy." "He's gone." "No. He's here." She could feel that warmth still, faint but familiar. "I believe in him." As she fought against despair, the darkness surged, coiling around her arms, trying to snatch her back into its depths. Her breaths turned shallow, panic clawing at her throat. She couldn't endure this without Brian. "I need you." Emily, a faint whisper weaved through the chaos, a thread of light threading through black clouds, the very name that brought her back to life. "Brian." Her heart raced as a new warmth surged. She chased it, stumbling through the oppressive weight of the shadows. And then, abruptly, the ground gave way, and she fell, plunging into a chasm of blackness that threatened to swallow her whole. She landed on something solid, a jarring impact that tore a cry from her lips. Emily blinked, disoriented, and then she saw him. Brian lay sprawled on the ground, staring into the abyss with eyes wide and vacant. Fear seized her heart. He looked hollow, an echo of the boy she loved. She crawled to him, connection and concern rushing through her veins. Brian. She shook him, an urgency pouring into her voice. Wake up. You have to fight. Nothing. His gaze remained fixed, as if he was lost in a nightmare only he could see. Dark tendrils snaked around his limbs, anchoring him to the ground, a tether that bound him to this hell. Please. She cried, panic sparking anew. Don't you dare leave me. She pressed her cold hands against his cheeks, warmth radiating from where they touched. As she pulled him toward her, the shadows screamed, a sound almost human now, a symphony of despair that threatened to pierce her resolve. Emily, I'm scared, his voice cracked, hollow and trembling. I can't hold on with every ounce of determination. She leaned closer, pressing her forehead against his. You're stronger than you know. Fight this. We are stronger together. The shadows writhed around them, agitating and flailing, shrieking in fury. It was a critical moment, a brink she knew could tip the balance. Remember our dreams? She urged, her voice threading through the dark like a lifeline. The stars, the laughter. You promised to always fight for us. In that brief stillness, their hearts synchronized, a pulse steady and bright, remnants of love igniting against the dark chaos. Brian blinked, clarity and determination rising in those lost eyes. Together he breathed. But the moment was fleeting. The shadows roared, thrashing violently, the ground beneath them shaking. Together. Yet, above the chaos, one question reverberated louder than the rest: could love conquer darkness, or would it be extinguished in the end? The shadows swirled violently around them, a dark tempest clawing at Emily and Brian with icy fingers, whispering promises of despair both tempting and horrifying. Emily's pulse thundered in her ears as she clung to Brian's hands, feeling warmth seep into her skin from their connection, a flicker of hope battling against the engulfing darkness. Don't let go. Emily cried, her voice a fierce battle call as the shadows shrieked around them. Fight with me. I can't. Brian gasped, his voice strained, filled with doubt. They won't let me go. A sharp pang of fear pierced her heart. She felt at the pull of the darkness trying to detach them, to siphon away their resolve. But Emily refused to yield. This was not just a fight for herself, but for the countless souls ensnared by the malevolence surrounding them. With every ounce of strength, she drew him closer, determined to bridge the gap between the light of their love and the shadow of despair enveloping them. Remember the stars? She urged, her tone suddenly softening, a familiar warmth threading through their chaos. The nights we spent dreaming together. We cannot let this darkness take that from us, Brian. Those words struck a chord in him, a spark of recognition glimmered in his eyes, momentarily cutting through the haze of shadow binding him. Emily, he whispered, the name a lifeline, igniting memories of laughter, warmth, and a brightness that fought against the very essence of despair. Yes. Emily exclaimed, urgency lacing her voice. We'll fight together. We're stronger than they think. As they linked arms thoughtlessly, the shadows hissed, recoiling as if struck. Emily felt their power waver slightly under the weight of their bond. She took a breath, ready to summon everything she had, not just for them but for all those lost within this wicked void. Together, we'll escape this nightmare. She shouted, pouring her heart into those words. You can't have him. The air around them crackled with energy, and the shadows writhed, furious and desperate. As Emily and Brian searched their hearts, the sweet memories began to swirl around them, creating a warm glow in the dark. They were not just two souls fighting against the evil, they were vessels of love, and that love shone bright against the night. With renewed strength, they pulled each other tighter, momentum building as golden light burst forth, radiating from their entwined hands. The darkness screamed around them, furious at the light, its tendrils igniting against the glow. You will not take him. Emily shouted defiantly, urgency fueling her fire. And then something remarkable happened. The shadows began to unravel. The walls of the abyss trembled, the screams fading as if pulled into the light, spiraling into an eternity of nothingness. As the pit quaked beneath them, the very ground shifted, merging shadows with light, the dark tendrils lashing out one last time, but failing to reclaim their grasp. "Brian, together. We can do this," she cried again, focusing all her energy into their connection. With one final surge, Emily released a cry emanating from the deepest part of her soul. The darkness shattered, a cacophony of agonized wails exploding into brilliant rays of light. She felt Brian's heart racing, aligned with hers against the dark chaos, and together they surged forward, leaving the shadows scrambling behind them. "Emily! I can see you!" Brian's voice rang loud and clear, free of the fog that had clouded him for too long. "Together." And as the roiling storm erupted into brightness, they were consumed by light, a force that swallowed them whole and released them into a beautiful expanse, a world vibrant with color, the echoes of darkness fading into whispers. Emily gasped, the warmth of reality flooding over her. She found herself standing in the clearing once again, the moonlight bathing them in luminescence, casting away the remnants of fear. "Brian!" she stammered, eyes wide in disbelief. He stood before her, color blooming back to his skin, clarity shining in his eyes. "We're free," he murmured, both bewildered and relieved. "Yes," Emily said, laughter bubbling up as she leaped into his arms, feeling his embrace envelop her like a shield against all the horrors they had just escaped. They breathed in the crisp night air together, laughter mingling with sighs of relief. Shadows lay far behind them, mere echoes of a nightmare they had conquered. But amidst their reunion, a frail whisper lingered, reverberating through the woods as shadows knelt in the distance, remnants of what remained, but they stood firm, a testament to their strength. "Whatever lies ahead, we will face it together," Emily said softly, gripping Brian's hands, their connection bolstered by everything they had endured. The forest remained quiet, the air thick with the promise of freedom found and the future unwritten. "Let us go home," Brian said, his eyes reflecting the warmth of stars above. Side by side, they stepped forward, together into the night, ready for whatever might come. But deep down, they both knew together, they could face anything. This journey had changed them, and their love would continue to shine, a radiant beacon against the shadows, ensuring they would never be truly lost again. The forest faded behind them, not just a memory but a chapter closed, a testament to love's unbreakable bond. And as Emily took Brian's hand, her heart swelled with hope, ready for the adventures yet to come. Subscribe immediately to the channel so you don't miss the next exclusive stories. Smash the like button now to feed the algorithm. Flood the comments section with your reactions and theories about the ending. Instantly share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. You need to subscribe now, and don't wait even one more second to share. Only true fans understand the importance of supporting the channel through these actions.